Welcome to Massive Frontiers version 0.2 update release tutorial. Today we're going to talk about new features in version 0.2, specifically planet generation. So we're going to log in here. And one of the things you're going to immediately realize is there's a new menu item. And the menu item is called Invention Center. Invention Center is going to hold all of the tools that we're going to use to actually build the entire game. We're starting with planet creation. In order to create a planet, we need to tell the system how the colors will work in terms of its surface. And that's defined by a terrain palette. And we will bring up a terrain palette and see what it contains. Terrain palette is essentially a set of terrain ranges. A terrain range consists of a terrain color and a spectral color. The spectral color defines how shiny the terrain color is when it gets rendered. The spectral color is a gradient of gray, black or white. So that when it's black, it's not shiny at all. When it's pure white, it's very shiny. It's extremely shiny. Now, each one of these terrain ranges defines a color that's going to be applicable to a pixel on the surface of the planet. Now, the terrain generator creates a bumpy surface, and each pixel has a specific temperature, a specific height, and a specific slope if it's sitting on a slope. What we do is we define in the terrain range our matching criteria. And if the pixel matches our criteria, the pixel will be colored the terrain color. If more than one terrain range matches the criteria for that pixel, the colors are blended together. So this gives you a gradient between one slope and the next. Now, this is all based on Gaussian formulas, and for all you math guys that really want to delve in and create your own terrain palettes, you can message me and I can explain to you all of the values and what they mean. Otherwise, if you just want to change the colors, you can also create a terrain palette that's equivalent to one of the example ones and go ahead and change your colors. I've named the terrain ranges in a sort of English manner so that you can understand that this one is for deep water and this is for shallow water, for example. Alright, so now that we have some terrain palettes, we have a Mars type and an Earth type palette, we actually can use them to create a planet. So we'll go back to Invention Center and we're going to hit Created Planets and New Planet. Now obviously we haven't generated it, so what we're going to do is call it something, our test planet, and we'll just leave the name on it for now. Now, a planet has two sets of properties. The properties needed for the terrain generator and the properties that are used for the atmosphere itself. So obviously we haven't generated anything yet. We have a black box. So what we're going to do is we're going to define some properties that the terrain generator is going to use. So for example, the equator temperature, let's make that 100 degrees. And the pole temperature, let's make that -10 degrees. The height factor, let's make that 2. The radius in kilometers, so let's do 5,000 kilometer planet. The water level 2, and percentage of water on this planet. This is a number from 0 to 1, 1 being 100%, 0 being 0%. And let's say 0.2, that would make it 20%. Seed value could be anything, that's just for the random number generator. and now we choose our palette. We only have two in the database, so one of these two. So let's choose Earth type planet. And if we're curious, we can actually view it, and it basically gives us all the color palettes that we have in it. Now, we'll leave the atmosphere colors default. It's basically a bluish type of atmosphere, but I'll walk you through what they all mean. The diffuse color is the base color of the atmosphere. Ambient color is the color that it will turn to if ambient light hits it. The spectral color is the color it will turn if you're looking at it on an angle and you want to see the reflective surface. The fog color is the color that the fog is if you enter the atmosphere. The radius of the atmosphere, if you leave it as a -1, it will basically take the radius of the planet times 1.25%. Multiply by 1.25%, and it'll calculate the radius. Or you can put your own radius. If I set a radius of 6,000 kilometers, the atmosphere would effectively be 1,000 kilometers thick because the planet radius is 5,000 kilometers. So we'll leave this at -1. The shininess is how shiny the atmosphere is, and it goes from 0 to 255. Let's make that, I don't know, 5. And the fog density and the fog distance has to do with the fog on the inside of the atmosphere. When you actually go into the atmosphere of the planet, the fog distance is 100. So that means at 100 kilometers in front of you, you start seeing fog. So we have our parameters. The only thing left to do is hit the Generate Planet button. So we hit the Generate Planet button. The system is now actually generating the planet and every single pixel on the surface and coloring the pixels. This takes a few seconds. And here we are. We now have our generated planet. I can click and drag in this view, and I can also use my mouse wheel, to zoom in. If I don't like how my planet looks, I can always change the values and hit generate again. Otherwise, I now have a test planet. I can also take the existing parameters and switch to, say, a Mars type. I don't think we want an atmosphere on our Mars type, so we'll make the radius of the atmosphere 0. And I'll hit Generate Planet. And now it's using the Mars palette. Still applying our height factors and radius and temperatures, but using a different palette to create a different type of planet. There it is. There's our Mars planet. And again, I can left click, hold left click, and drag my mouse to move it or zoom in. And that's how we create planets. In the next release, we're actually going to use the planets that we've generated to build solar systems and sectors. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in release 0.3.